Good to go.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Miskatonic University Radio, a podcast exploring Fantasy Flight Games' Arkham Horror, the card game. I'm Dane.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Ben.
And today, everybody, we're going to be talking about Taboo, errata, and some things in between. Have you ever wondered why the Taboo list is the way that it is? Well, we're going to be here today to provide some amount of speculation and absolutely no solid answers. Welcome.
As usual, when do we have solid answers? We should also mention that for anyone who is following along with this, check out our most recent episode where we got to interview MJ and Jeremy about a lot of topics, but we talked a lot about game balance and the Taboo list and stuff. So this is in a way kind of like a supplement to that.
And orphans fixing cars. That was a very important part of the podcast.
I'd already forgotten about that until now. So I guess, I mean, the first thing, pretty much the only part of doing the podcast that Ben genuinely enjoys is the part where he gets to explain a new FAQ rules update. So we should probably allow him to do that task, right?
Yeah, it's true. We delayed it. I delayed it because there was rumors there would be an immediate follow-on for Return to the Circle and Done, a couple things. But that has, of course, also been delayed, at least in the US. So sadly, we'll just have to jump right into it. I don't know why I labeled this slide boring stuff. This is clearly the best stuff. So there was a couple of functional erratas. Some of it's kind of boring. Bait and switch level 3. They made it a tactic. By made it a tactic, I mean they made it a trick. Definitely made that wrong on my slide here. So now it matches up with level zero, and I think Rita can take it. So now Rita can bait and switch. It was a tactic before.
So previously was the level 0 one was a trick and the level 3 one was a tactic?
No, I've messed up the slide. I didn't spot check the slide. It was the level 0 was a trick and the level 3 was a tactic, and now they're both tricks, so that Rita can take
Quick,
them.
Ben, reload your slide.
And by Rita can take them, I of course mean she could already take it because it's a red card. I don't know what happens if I exile this slideshow, Dane. It might break my OBS.
Yeah,
so it's too late. I can't refresh it. So anyway, a couple acts I think were modified. The which one is this from? I think this is the last scenario in Circle Done, or the second last scenario. The Black Expanse. There's a couple acts. I think it all says forced after an enemy takes a clue, gets with one more clues on it's defeated. You take control of the clues, but it said something else previously.
That's Dreamlands. That's the
Dreamlands.
The Underworld.
That's an old errata then. Yeah. I guess I could have figured that out by looking at the little image of the little cat.
Exactly.
But and then the last so in the last scenario of Innsmouth, the first act, the objective is changed so you can choose to advance, where previously you were forced to advance if you met the condition, which you could meet depending on what you did in the campaign and be forced to immediately advance. It's very sad.
That's right.
I also have noted here that in Return to the Circle and Done, MJ intends for the wine cellar to be connected to the Victorian halls and vice versa. I don't know what that means because I don't remember what those locations are, and they might just be new in the Circle and Done, Return to the Circle and Done, but I have noted here.
That only makes sense. Like, what good is a wine cellar if you can't get to it from your Victorian halls?
It's true,
yeah.
Right?
When you're stumbling drunk out of your wine cellar, you need to make sure that you're in the right place.
Precisely, yeah.
And then there were a couple of cards that they switched play versus put into play on them or added it. Hungering Blade and Crystallizer of Dreams. The additional cost is to play the card, not to put the card into play, which changes ways that you can dodge the penalties for putting the weaknesses in. I think it makes it align with the dog. What's the dog called?
The Summoned Hound?
Summoned Hound, yeah. So it makes it align makes it align with the text on that. Actually, I guess it makes it so if you do put both of these into play, you can dodge the weaknesses. So I misspoke. So this makes it so you can do shenanigans to dodge having to put the weaknesses in your deck. So I guess that makes these a little bit more interesting.
Interesting.
Although for Hungry Blade, that's bad though, because you kind of want the bloodlust. So
yeah, that's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, no, so it's bad for Hungry Blade. For Crystallized Dreams, it's good though, because you don't put the horrible monster in that Dane immediately draws and cries for us to help him with. So, And then also Yazzie T. I assume everyone knows what I'm referring to when I say that. Dexter's novel weakness also prevents you from putting assets into play in addition to playing assets, so you can't use shenanigans to dodge it. Yeah. Lastly, the most interesting errata is the functional errata. A couple, I think almost all of these we were expecting. So Guided by the Unseen, it's a card from Innsmouth. With the head, it was a fast trigger that when you during a skill test at your location, the performing master can search the top 3 cards of their deck for a card that can be committed to the test, and they spend a secret to commit that card, and they shuffle a deck. But the problem with this is you could just do it infinitely until you actually got a card that could be committed. And trigger all your researches, right? Yeah, trigger all your researches and stuff. So that was incredibly powerful in the right deck. So they just added a limit once per test to it. Very simple.
That one was just a straight up like the minute the card was printed, we knew they were going to do.
We're like,
probably they or maybe something else.
Yeah, they just forgot to put it on there. You know, Seeking Answers is another one that we always had kind of vague wording. When it came out, it was investigate. If you succeed, discover 2 total clues from among your location and connecting locations. But that would be how it was worded. That means it would include, or how it was worded, that means you would also get the clue from the default investigate. So you get 3 clues with this card, which I think was not the intent. So now it's is worded so instead of discovering the clue at your location, you discover 2 clues. So it gets 2 clues instead of 3. Clues.
Yeah, this one is like I understand that this is what the original intent, and it's fine if they want to fix it this way, but it's a little bit disappointing because the original version was like a good card, but I would say not a broken one. Like it was already arguably like maybe as good as Deduction 2, but I would say probably worse in most cases. So now this version is like I'm probably never gonna play it, but it's fine.
I mean, if there's like
Fish could consider it. But...
Yeah, if you have like an event-based seeker, you might think about it too.
I think like there's probably a solid argument for playing it in like 2-player if you're trying to clean off a location that's adjacent to you without actually going there.
Yeah,
maybe Luke or somebody, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, it allows some shenanigans for fetching stuff like Dane said with Trish. You can use it to trigger her ability to like evade something or get an extra clue at a distant location or whatever. And maybe we'll see something with Monterey, who likes to just run across the map all the time. He can use this to fetch stuff he's run away from or whatever. And then what else we had? We had Norman. They finally errated Norman to have the up to 5 other Mystic cards of level 0. Hooray! To match Carolyn and presumably the Edge of the Earth Investigators and all that, just so he works properly with the dual class cards. But previously, a dual class card would count against his Mystic slots if it was also a Seeker card, which was sad. So, and then the last one here is with the Wendy's Amulet change. This is like an actual errata that I don't think I was expecting. They changed her force effect to be after you play an event or discard an event from play, place it on the bottom of your deck instead of your discard pile. So they added the or discard an event or discard it. So that specifically, I think this was targeting Premonition Windy, which was if you could recur Premonition and use it for every single skill check.
It's kind of just like any case where there's an event that does not immediately go into the discard pile after the end of the action where you play it, but it kind of stays on the field for some reason and then gets discarded later, I guess.
They released an article with all this errata and Taboo, and they mentioned Premonition Windy, but they also implied there might be future events that this would have been broken with. So I'm wondering if there'll be some Edge of the Earth cards that in combo with the old Wendy's card were also just as broken, perhaps in Survivor, so that they didn't have to put 5 more additional cards in your deck just to get Premonition. So I don't think it's
Rip Premonition Wendy, a combo that was interesting, but I think was never actually as good as people thought it was. But
I played it. I can confirm that it was very ridiculous.
No, Dan, you're just wrong on this one. You being able to know what you are going to draw every time means you can always commit perfectly.
Right.
And never...
Or not commit anything.
Yeah, and never burn resources incorrectly.
You can just draw enough cards that you don't have to commit perfectly.
Not everybody's only playing...
Yeah, but Wendy doesn't have that power. Actually, it's Lucky Star in that case.
Wendy can draw a lot of cards. I don't know. I'm mostly glad that they fixed this for us so we don't have to argue about it anymore.
Yep, that's true.
I'm worried it was tearing our
Either
friendship
way, it's in the
apart.
ground.
Yeah, it's true. All right. So that was it for errata of the cards. Yeah, I'm not going to read all these words. I just didn't have time to filter them down. So there was a couple rules changes. As I mentioned, they added the Edge of the Earth investigators to the list of examples for classes that have other in their deck building, which sort of implied that all 5 of them are going to have that deck building like Norman. It's maybe confirmed completely now. Maybe not, but that's how their deck building is going to be.
It's just barely not confirmed. Like, it's definitely hinting at it pretty heavily, but I think it's still not conclusive.
Oh no,
It's like
Dane! I just
behind the
realized.
curtains, it's feet out.
Dane, I just realized this is really embarrassing. We're wearing the same shirt. Oh no.
Yeah.
Since when did you start wearing the MUR shirt when we record?
Losers.
Be loser.
Yeah. When you guys go to a show, do you like wear a T-shirt of the band that you're gonna see? When you guys play shows in a band, do you wear the T-shirt of your own band to play the
Not
shows?
really.
Because that's kind of what you're doing right now. For listeners listening to the podcast, Ben and Dan are both nerding out wearing our MUR T-shirt.
This is true.
So
Mostly
bad.
because I don't have
Our MUR T-shirt that maybe one day we'll put on Redbubble, maybe.
Bad job, you guys. I'm wearing a shirt of a radio show, which is kind of like an old school podcast for those of our listeners who don't remember that.
Anyway, realized I lost the chat. All right. Anyway, so other fun functional changes is you being at no location. Yeah,
they kind of just cleaned up some stuff that was more or less clear, but like wasn't completely set in stone before, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can never be at no location. And stuff that hidden cards in your hand, if they're in your hand and you're eliminated, they go back in the discard pile. I thought that was already an actual rule. Yeah, whatever.
Now it is.
And there's an example here for interpreting when taking or being dealt damage. I think this is also just how it works. So these are just clarifications. You know, when you take damage, you take it yourself, and then it gets assigned to stuff. So this says you can also includes triggering an effect when its stuff gets put on your assets. I guess this one directly deals damage to your ally, then maybe this triggers or something. Not that exciting. These are boring rules changes. Important FAQ though, if anyone doubted this, is Zoe's ability does in fact trigger off of swarm enemies. It's very important. So she can be very rich in Dreamlands.
Some people basically already knew that, right?
I mean, that's how I interpreted it. This one's an FAQ, so someone asked and they just clarified it to make it official there for anyone that doubted Zoe's ability to make lots of money from Zoogs by killing them, or actually just hanging out with them, I guess. You know.
Yeah. Just zooging out.
Yeah.
Like we all do.
Yeah, and then this last one is you can look at face down cards that are beneath or attached to cards you control. Including when you draw them or play them. You can't look at cards that have been attached to encounter cards or otherwise placed face down via scenario effect, unless otherwise instructed. So I think this was also pretty well known, but it's always good to have a clarification in the official rules rather than like in an email that one person asked and it's been spread around sort of kind of on Arkham TV or whatever. So, all right, taboo time. So everyone's here for, I'm sure. At least the people that aren't cool enough to love the nitty gritty details of FAQ. It's an errata. So we had 8 cards, I believe, updated in this latest taboo, and this taboo was end of June, I want to say. So elusive was changed. It used to be on the chained list with was it 1 or 3?
2, I believe.
2. That was close. Now it's mutated. Now it is disengaged from each enemy engaged with you and moved to a connecting location with no enemies instead of to a revealed location with no enemies.
Anywhere with no enemies, yeah.
And so
it's kind of similar to Shortcut now, except it costs money and is a little more restrictive, but also disengages you.
Yeah, was it always fast? It was, right? Yeah.
It was always fast, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it's just kind of like a little bit more expensive Shortcut, and you can't play it on other people.
I mean, it still makes sense thematically, right?
Yeah, I mean, it still functions as like, oh, you slip away from the enemies. It's just it's probably more in line for level 0 card. Like previously, before they touched it, it was like a auto include in almost
At
every
least
deck that
one
could
of.
take it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it was an easy like jump across the map when you needed to retreat or just get somewhere fast card. So it's pretty reasonable now. I don't know if I might throw one of it in some decks still, particularly maybe like Monterey or something who wants to be able to move around. It's nice to have extra move cards for him. So
That's not terrible.
and it is a tactic, so I guess Mark can take it again now. I guess he could
He
always
sure
take
can,
it,
yeah.
but
He could always take it.
and there is a trench coat in it, so but it's not Mark. Could that be Mark as a very old man?
No.
You don't think Mark
I feel like
upgrades
that's
to wearing
Mummy
like a?
Withers or something.
Nah, he's got a bow
I
tie.
don't know.
Do any of the investigators have a bow tie in their official art?
Norman, maybe.
Uh,
Nah,
does Dexter's in like a tux, right?
nah, he's
Oh
got a
yeah,
tux.
Dexter might.
I don't know. If
He might
not,
have it
that's
on that Shards of the Void card where
hmm.
he looks like Super Random.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't know. I can't remember. So he's got a bow tie. We're good. All right. I thought we'd have to write an angry letter to MJ about the lack of bow ties. So anyway, other two cards that were changed were the Springfield and the Telescopic Sight. They're constantly trying to make these cards, buff these cards with the taboo list to make them playable. So now what they do is the Springfield is back to being a level 4 card.
Wait,
And
what?
it yeah, it was previously chained to be level 3, and that was what it was, right?
It's hard to keep track of it, I know.
I did. Yeah, so now its ability is or it gains an ability no, is that right the first time? Its ability gains that you can disengage, that you can attack. Your attack can target any non-elite enemy up to one location away from its standard range, ignoring the aloof and retaliate keywords. What was it before? Oh, it just couldn't
You
be
could
used to
only-
attack engaged enemies.
Right.
So they built
So this is
in the telescopic
fine
sight to
gun
it,
now.
basically.
Yeah, you can shoot enemies off of you. You can shoot enemies off of friends.
Mm-hmm.
You can shoot enemies in adjacent locations.
It makes sense that any weapon card that's themed around like shooting someone from far away, it makes sense that you would get to ignore retaliate, because like how is it going to retaliate against you unless it
Yeah.
also has a gun or something?
Well,
Right.
it's nice that it can ignore aloof now too, because you can use it to kill whatever annoying enemies.
Yeah, birds.
Yeah, birds. I mean, it's still a 4 cost,
Really,
2 hand, 3 ammo card, which is rough, but
I'm still not sure that I would play this, but it's worth mentioning that for Echoes of the Past, the Springfield is now absolutely boss for taking out those annoying seekers at the beginning, because they have 3 health and they're aloof and it's really hard to get to them. With the Springfield, you could basically just like take a step, play the Springfield, and then like just dome one in the head and kill it, and that would be pretty cool.
yeah.
There's a few scenarios I can think of where like the map is really big, things only spawn on empty locations, etc. Like there's some application, I think.
And it feels like it's a tech card, so I feel like it's still hard to like get it in your deck for a whole campaign. Maybe someday there'll be some like guardian card that like lets you like free swap out weapons of the same level or something in between scenarios or something. You know, like an armory or something you go go to in between. I don't know.
Like
Gun
sealed
depth.
vault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the last one here is the telescopic sight. They changed this one to no longer have the text attached asset cannot be used to attack enemies engaged with you. That seems like a huge improvement because now it doesn't just automatically nerf whatever weapon you attach to it.
Okay, so this just Springfield defies things, right? Like
Yeah,
you can-
basically.
It remains very funny that you can attach this to a flamethrower.
Yeah. Yep, that is extremely funny. Well, it doesn't
I'm very happy
disable
about that.
it doesn't disable a flamethrower anymore though. Previously, it made it so you
Yeah.
couldn't use the flamethrower at all.
Right.
Now it just doesn't do anything, right? Because the flamethrower damages stuff
Because-
engaged with you.
Hooray.
So it's because the flamethrower has the stipulation where it needs to be engaged with you, and this
Yeah.
said that you can't use it engaged with you.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I
like,
mean, yeah, this is more interesting. I feel like I would get
Makes
this before the Springfield, right? Because it just gives the Springfield ability.
yeah, it does. I mean, it makes it's almost doubly as expensive, right? It's like
if you're already playing like a Thompson or something, sure,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe
Yeah.
like for Tommy, where he has like Becky, and he can also use like bigger guns just in general and focus on that, like attachments and upgrades might be cool
Yeah,
to use it.
anyone that tries to do like a single weapon focus deck where they refuel it like Tommy, then they might consider this to make it so they don't have to move around as much, and they can just like stand in the middle of the map and like spin around and shoot
Can
whatever
you put
enemies
this on a
around.
shotgun, and then
Uh,
somehow like you just shotgun things from a location away?
yeah, right. Shotgun doesn't have any limitations. So you have to
That's
engage with
You could
it.
hilarious.
even put
That's
it on
just
the
the
sawed-off
flamethrower.
shotgun, which is really funny. Actually, no, is the sawed-off shotgun one-handed?
It is
Yeah, I
one-handed.
think it is.
That's too bad. That would be funny.
All right, and the last batch of Taboo cards was basically all the same. Three Aces, a Watchful Piece, Yuka Catastrophe, and Hollow all were had removed from game, added to them after their effect goes off. And Pendant of the Queen, once it runs out of charges, also has removed game from game added to it. So this basically prevents you from recurring these cards infinitely.
It's a pretty
Which
huge bummer because the Three Aces, Pennant of the Queen, Rogue Mandy deck that just cycled the cards all the time was incredibly fun to play, and assembling the pennant was kind of the most fun part of it. Because you could basically use the pennant pretty much every turn, which was obviously great. But yeah, it kind of had to die. I'm a piece of it.
yeah, I don't know about
Well,
the Three
it's not that it's
Aces.
necessarily dead. I think that the argument for you doing that is because it comes in with charges in it. You can use things like Elder Sophist and like other ways to like
Uh,
continually kind of try to put charges on it, which
so
is I
the
think fair.
the problem is that there's a lot of ways to put secrets on things in Seeker, but it's really hard to put more charges on things as a Seeker. Like if you can somehow play, if you're playing like
You mean Luke?
if you're
Just play
yeah,
Luke
if you're
and be
playing with
fine.
Luke with well if you're playing Luke and you have like recharge, then you could maybe
Yeah.
make it happen, but you'd really
Oh
need
yeah.
that because there's within like Mandy's card pool, you really can't do much about putting extra charges on it.
That's
And
fair. Yeah.
it's not really worth even putting in your deck, I think, and spending the XP if it's just going to disappear after you use it 3 times. Although it does shrink your
Exactly.
deck down even more. So if you want to play a 27 card Mandy deck, you could kind of. Oh no, actually, hang on. It's only the pennant that gets removed.
Yeah.
The
The segments
useless
hang out.
segments would still go back in your deck, wouldn't
Yeah.
they? Yeah, that's kind of bad.
I think they don't go back in your deck anymore, right? Is that part of the change here?
Maybe not. I mean, I guess you could also just hold them in hand and use them
Yeah.
to trigger like
Yeah.
you know.
Previously, you have put them back in your deck, but now it's if when you should say if this card has no charges, you take it out and put them back in. Now it just gets removed from the game, so they don't get added
Yeah.
back.
Three aces. I honestly am not really sure it really had to get mutated because it all it did was give you money and cards, and it was just kind of a fun game to play. Like I don't think it's as big a deal, but sure, fine, whatever. And then
I
Hallow
think
and
it's
Watchful Peace I think were inevitable just because you
exactly
shouldn't be able to get effects like that on demand. Basically, you should really only be
right.
able to get them very
Once.
rarely.
I mean, even
Like I
you
mean,
could.
compare them to what's the Survivor card that exiles itself, right?
There's more than one of those, Dane.
Just one of
Flare. I
those.
don't
Well,
know.
the one that removes the doom,
Fortune or Fate.
yes, Fortune
Yeah.
or Fate, FOF.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
compare these
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
Why would you ever play FOF if you could play Shirt and just like include a couple bless cards in your deck?
It's basically true.
Yeah.
You Catastrophe is a little bit of a bummer because I feel like that was a pretty good ingredient for William York being a
That
kind
was
of like
weird. Yeah.
kind of a lower tier, high tier investigator kind of. And it seemed pretty. I never got to play that deck, but it seemed pretty fun.
I mean, you could also recur this a lot if you have drawing thin and like resourceful. That's like all you need
Yeah.
to pick it back up. But yeah, York also got free pickups back. Those other investigators. There's probably more and more investigators that we'll see that can have some effect that like something out of the graveyard. So I think I think this is reasonable. It probably I don't know if I'll play it anymore. If I only can use it once or twice, but
Yeah, it's
That's
it's
the
kind
thing.
of it's kind of fine.
Yeah,
I guess
it's like
I think they wanted it to be like an emergency card, and it became like a build around, almost a build around card for some investigators, where they just focus on like being able to play it constantly. So
Yeah.
it kind of feels bad to like sink 4 XP into an event that you only get to play once, but also it's hard to justify it being like exploitable, even in the way that York could kind of cycle you catastrophes, like where he could basically just keep playing them as long as he had the money to do so.
yeah,
Um, But things like three aces, I really feel like we're victim to things other than rogues exploiting them. For example, that Mandy deck. Like I think that rogues just don't have that sheer power level, like that sheer amount of draw that you can find the three aces very easily and consistently play them. I know that there's that one skill card uh, that allows you to like basically reveal cards from the top of your library to find another rogue skill card. So if you include only three aces and like two of those, then you will always get three aces as long as you have any
Mm.
combination of some amount of them in your hand. But like I feel like that's still going through a lot of motions in order to get like three aces to work compared to like some like garbage like Mandy that can just like get it every like third turn.
Yeah, the bottom line is even in like the best case scenario for this in a rogue deck, which is probably like Winnie, it was
Yeah.
still good, not really broken.
Right.
And in the Mandy deck, it was excellent, but there's also it's not an essential part of the deck. Like the deck now that this has been tabooed is still great, right? You can still play like Easy Mark and plenty of other stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it basically seems fine. There's nothing on here that really seems particularly upsetting, or I think it is good that they're. Hopefully, this is a signal that things like Hallow and Watchful Peace are going forward, like pretty much always going to remove from game.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we talked to MJ and Jeremy, I got the sense that they don't really want to put remove from game on most stuff if they can. You know, so I think that's why they maybe push to not have it on cards initially, but some stuff just kind of
Which
needs
is
it,
nice
right?
because it
So,
it makes any type of recursion card worse if all the good cards can't be recurred.
right.
Like I mean, I think Resourceful is already not a great card, but if you can't use it to get back things like Watchful Peace, then why even play it, right?
Yeah.
But
Well.
it's all a balancing act, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So that was everything that was in the published article. We had a couple topics we were going to discuss related to Taboo. So up first is what kind of wanted to think of what we talk about Seekers being great a lot. So are they really
Do
OP,
we?
or is it just some type of um, yellow bias that we have? So
I mean, I think if you go back to the beginning of the game, initially it felt like in a 3 or 4 player game, you basically needed a seeker in order to keep pace with clues. And
Yes.
then after the first maybe like cycle or two of the game, that basically changed to where you didn't really need one anymore. But then I feel like over the last year or two, the seeker card pool has kind of hit this critical mass where it's become kind of insane. And I mean, I think it's just we asked MJ and Jeremy about this, and I think MJ said like on the one hand, seekers are always going to be really good because getting clues is how you win the game, right? And
Right.
seekers are the ones that are best at getting clues, and that's totally true. And especially in multiplayer games where there are a lot of clues and being able to pick them up efficiently is really important. That's kind of inevitable, but I think that there's more going on than just that. I think that there's kind of like a whole system of problematic cards, I think, in the seeker card pool.
Yeah. Exactly.
That said, I absolutely love playing those decks, and I'm happy to play a seeker pretty much all the time. So I'm it's worth discussing, but I'm also not exactly like picketing outside the FFG HQ for them to ban all these cards, right? Because in the meantime, I'm having fun.
Sure, sure. I mean, I think like one of these cards that we put up, Melteroni, aka City Kicker, is like we used to take that in every deck, right? Like around
Yeah,
Dunwich and Carcosa, that used to be like a mandatory 8 experience, and we never thought that there would be a time where that wouldn't be included in a deck. Turns out there is
I mean,
because other classes can handle themselves and you better now, and you have better things to get. For example, Pathfinder joined the taboo list and is now 3 experience to get. So it's like by chaining these cards, it makes it harder for seekers to just to be able to cover every single base. It used to be the situation where if you have 10 experience, you can get 2 Melteronis and 2 Pathfinders.
yeah,
And like give me 2 cards in another class that you can do that with that are like worth that and will give you the amount of absolutely ridiculous value and versatility that these 2 cards gave you.
yeah.
Like
Dane, I think you're right. Like we kind of don't play Melteroni quite as much anymore, not because it's a worse card, but only because if you have like a fighter in your group, usually you can afford to focus just on clues, and you can go even more crazy just picking up a million clues using something like Archaic Glyphs Guiding Stones, which is another incredibly powerful card. But even apart from just cards that make Seekers really, really good at getting clues, like Guiding Stones or just recurring Deduction 2 a lot, there's also just Seekers have a really crazy amount of fast cards they can play. So they have Shortcut and Pathfinder, which are really powerful, so they almost never need to spend actions to move. They have cards like Knowledge's Power that let them activate tomes, which can be abused in a million ways and is really,
Thank
really
God.
strong. Even though that's now tabooed, it now costs 2 XP. It's still really,
Right.
really powerful.
Yes.
They even just have things like they have a lot of skill cards like Deduction that draw them cards without having to spend an action. They have Cryptic Research and
The
No Stone
perception.
Unturned
Yeah.
that can tutor or draw cards at instant speed. So they just have, like, when you're playing a Seeker, a lot of times it feels like you only have 3 actions, but it feels like you get to do like 8 or 9 things on your turn. Like it feels like you're doing more with your turn than if you're a rogue that has like 6 actions because of Leo and a bunch of other cards.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that a lot of the time, maybe the philosophy in the beginning was that Seekers should be this like glass cannon where the cannon is pointed at the ground, and the ground being like where the clues are, right? Like
Right.
you want to destroy the amount of clues on every single location, but if an enemy gets on you, you're just done for, which is absolutely not the case ever
Yeah.
with
Because
Seekers. They have so many options, and also that's the whole point of having a guardian or somebody who
right.
can deal.
And but you're right that, like, I mean, we could easily play you could easily play a 4 player game with all Seekers and it would be probably incredibly powerful and probably better than a balanced group, right? It's
Right.
just because really the bottom line is just um this is the class that kind of has card draw in their color pie as much as any class does. And it's the same as, like, if you go back and look at like the early days of Magic, where all these old blue cards are incredible and they're now like staples in all the nerdy Eternal formats. Just being able to draw lots of cards can paper over pretty much any weakness that your class or your deck has,
Exactly.
because especially in this game where you can commit things, pretty much any problem you can solve by just drawing a million cards and you always have stuff to commit.
It's about consistency, right?
Yeah.
It just makes everything so much more consistent.
I would also say just one last thing, that there's like 3 what I think of as kind of like the really top tier Seekers are like Mandy, Amanda, and Daisy, and there's others that are pretty good as well, but those are like, to me, the top ones
Yeah.
that just have very powerful abilities and good stats. And like other classes also have maybe has like a good ability and good stats for what they want to do, but Seekers just have like an abundance of them. Which, I think if they would, maybe if we saw stronger investigators from some of the other classes, maybe we wouldn't be calling this out as much. Uh, but yeah, I mean, that's our perspective. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to it, but
It's really tough, I think, because how do you modify the card pool without having folks having it like change the way that you play Seeker? For example, like what if they just eliminated Pathfinder? It just
it,
joined Double or Nothing on Forbidden.
honestly, I would be sad about it, but it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world.
Yeah, it's like things like that are like, yeah, it sucks, but like
Or
it's kind of like
make
probably a
it like
mistake.
exceptional level, make it like cost 4 XP and be exceptional or something. Like, it
Limit
wouldn't
one per
be,
deck.
yeah, it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's again, it doesn't really seem to be a problem, but I think it is sometimes worth calling out, and I think we'll talk later in some of the other topics about um how issues like this can or cannot kind of affect the game. So we'll kind of come back to it. Ben's
So
back.
I am back. I was fixing my audio. Might have misclicked. You might have cut out for a second for some reason. It wasn't my fault. Anyway, so aside from Seekers, what do we think of the other 4 classes? How well are they balanced against each other in Seekers?
I mean, so I think that since Dan and I had started playing the game, maybe even before I met you, Ben, Guardians and Seekers were just the thing, right? Like if you didn't have a Guardian, you were going to have a really hard time dealing with the potential amount of monsters and things that could come out for the deck when you're playing at like 3 or 4 people. And that's why Machete was so big, and also
Mhm.
why the downside was so severe, but also as long as you were able to use things like Vicious Blow and etc., you could manage that. So for me, like Guardians sit kind of right near Seekers in that, like, if you don't have a Guardian in your deck, it's going to be tough for you to deal with things. Maybe not so much so now because you have people like Tony and Yorick and Silas who can deal with things in different ways than Guardians can. But the general shtick of Guardians is to murder, and that's it. And in that way, maybe it feels a little one dimensional, but I personally love playing Guardians. I think that they're very, very strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's less of a thing than what we were just talking about with Seekers, only because when you're playing a Seeker or just a clue getter in general, the more optimized your deck is, the better it is, and there's like no ceiling to it because you can just win the game faster. With a Guardian, if your Guardian and your kind of the fighting contingent of your party is strong enough to keep the enemies under control, there's not really a whole lot to be gained by being even more efficient on top of that. So you hit a point of diminishing returns.
Exactly.
Aside from like killing bosses and stuff, which is definitely a thing, but that's way less. That doesn't happen that often. But yeah, I mean, I would agree Guardians are the best at fighting stuff still, but there's, there's plenty of decks you can make outside of Guardian that are like good enough that they can adequately handle what you need to do.
Absolutely.
But I think that hybrid decks are really good even in like a 3 or 4 player game. It is really good to have maybe at least one person in your group who's kind of flexible and can do enemy management and clues. And I think there are strong viable decks from each of the really all 5 classes that can do kind of hybridy stuff. And there's advantages either way too. Like Mystics, you get to ward stuff, which is really strong. That's like a nice bonus in addition to being able to get clues and fight things. Rogues, you get to play a lot of cards that involve gambling, and everyone likes that. It's fun. So
Yeah.
there at least there's like different play styles that are all kind of good and can contribute meaningfully to the group. So I kind of think that it's different from maybe the early days of the game where it felt like if you were playing like Jenny, you just like couldn't do anything. Like there was basically nothing you could really do to make
aside from
difference.
solo. Yeah.
This is we're basically all talking about multiplayer stuff here because in solo, Guardians and in solo, like Survivors and Rogues are great, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I
guess
think
that might have been
I think as the card pool expanded, it opened up ways for Survivor and Rogue and Mystic to function more in a large group and still be able to do their wacky class stuff, like whatever nonsense Rogues do, where they gamble, and Survivor's doing weird recursion stuff. Yeah, all their hijinks. But to be able to compete in terms of efficiency with Guardians and Seekers, or at least getting close, while still being goofy and fun. So I think that's definitely a big improvement there.
I think the really important thing to note about what I was saying about Guardians earlier was that the diminishing returns thing is absolutely true. Seekers are OP because they are proactive and they will always be able to find clues if there are clues on the board. Whereas if you play something like comparing like something like Pathfinder to Safeguard, Pathfinder saves you actions to move, but you're going to be just pressing one button basically the whole game. And for some people that doesn't feel great, but for some it's fine. And Guardians kind of similar thing. You're just going to be pressing one button, which is murder. But once you're done with monsters, like the rest of what you can do is like set up and heal yourself, maybe give some people some cash at some point, some cards maybe with things like Stand Together. But like really, you're once there's no monsters on the board, you're like useless. And I say that quote unquote because there's nothing for you to do. You've done your job and you're just on standby. Whereas Seekers always can push forward. And I think to talk to your point a little bit, Dan, about like how that's why hybrid classes are really good because they can do both. Because they can shrivel an enemy and then use their clairvoyance to pick up some clues on the way. And in that way, it actually makes them very efficient at doing these things. People, classes like Mystic and Rogue can do this particularly well.
Yeah.
I've realized why Dan likes the Seeker and the Guardian based on your explanation there. Dan always played a mage in World of Warcraft, And what Mage did is they pressed all of their buttons and then they did evocation for 8 seconds to get all their mana back, and then they pressed all their buttons again to do a bunch of damage.
I would like to add 2 addenda to that. First off, I played Arcane when Arcane was the strongest mage spec, but I vastly preferred Fire, and whenever possible, I would always play a Fire mage, which was more interesting and way more fun. And secondly, I had other characters too, and I rocked like alt runs with like a Death Knight or a Priest or anything. But yeah, the mage was like the main for sure. Ben played a mage too, but then he abandoned the glorious mage fraternity to go play.
We had 5 mages.
No one really
it was
understood
too
why.
it was
I
too
don't know
many
what any of
mages.
this
I wanted to be a boomkin. We needed that 13% raid buff or whatever it was, you know.
I think this was before I started playing the game with Ben, but my understanding was that when something like Ben was like, "Oh, I guess someone has to be a Moonkin. I guess it's got to be me. Here I go." And everyone's like, "Wait, what?" And Ben was like, "All right, if you guys insist." And everyone was like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" And then Ben had already like started rolling a druid. So I don't know. This isn't interesting to anybody. Let's move on.
Speaking of card games,
Well, or cooperative games like MMOs, this is also one.
Yeah.
Do we really, because it's a cooperative game, should we really care about these power level of these player cards investigators against one another, or is it all just a fun time? Are we just egging on everybody's parade?
I think
That's
the
a
answer
phrase.
is like no and kind of yes, or yes and kind of no.
yeah,
I mean,
I like that answer.
I guess the way I would explain it is this: is like we talked with MJ and Jeremy in the last episode about how different people play this game for different reasons, and even within the cast, like I mean, we all kind of enjoy the game for some of the same reasons, but kind of weighted to different extents. And for me in particular, I really like playing the game from kind of like an optimization mechanical point of view of like trying to build a deck that works really well. So I mean, I think you guys are like that too. Just it's maybe like a slightly different emphasis depending on which one of us we're talking about. But so for me, like I don't ever really want to, if I'm ever in a position where like there are cards that are really really strong and really fit well into like a good deck, but if you include them it just makes the game too easy and it kind of trivializes everything. That's a bummer for me because it means I basically have to like either forget that these cards exist but like still kind of know that they're there,
A la
or
Rex, right?
yeah, or I have to just like play them and then know that I'm not only am I maybe making the game not as much fun for me, but I'm even potentially like making it less fun for everyone else in the group. And I definitely don't want to do that. So like for me, it is really important to like the kind of viability and fun level of a card game, even a co-op card game, if there's like meaningful choices to make when you're making a deck and there's not just like obvious choices that are way better than everything else, or if there's like individual decks that just kind of crush the entire game, you know?
Yeah, and I think to talk to that point, we mentioned that to MJ about like how seeker cards still are in a position where they're really good, and there are some other cards in classes that just see play in every single like amalgamation of any deck ever. For example, a card like Lucky Cigarette Case for me, sure it feels good to play, but it doesn't feel good in deck building because you just have that slot built out. You basically you have to make 28 cards around Lucky Cigarette Cases, and like for me, it's just such a binary effect that it's really boring. And I would rather include fun things like Crystallizer or use other like more interesting ways of getting that value.
I was about to say, Dane, the reason you picked, of all the different cards you could have picked, the reason you said Cigarette Case is because it competes with your favorite pet card, which is Crystallizer of Dreams, and it utterly crushes it.
That's one of them. Yeah, absolutely. And like it's just cards like that when it gets to a point where I'm just like, I don't want to put this in my deck, and people are correct in saying, no, Dane, you don't have to. And the taboo list is very, very optional. And you can make whatever taboo list you want, really, right? You can completely engineer your own taboo list at home. Have a kitchen table taboo list that you just have with a play group. But it's maybe it just feels like I still have to because the taboo list hasn't said so. Because I do really appreciate the insight that is given when developers themselves speak about cards that they've created and either pull back or give a little more on cards. And it feels like they breathe new life into different strategies and things like that.
I think for me, like, so the Cigarette Case example, I'm totally fine having a couple of cards that are really strong. If it's always a trade off, right? Because on the one hand, it's a very fun card that's very tied into that class's theme, and it kind of, because most rogues play it, it's like it makes you feel like you're playing a rogue deck when you play it. I think you can have some cards like that, and yeah, the cost is that maybe other cards get out competed by those, but there are benefits as well. Like it's like a Netrunner with like Desperado. Yes, basically no one ever played any other criminal console, but it was an incredibly fun card that really fit with the criminal theme, and it was, to me, that was like a worthwhile trade-off, right? At least for a while.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
but what's go ahead.
compare it with Machete that got tabooed out because it was basically pushing all the other weapons out.
Right.
Yeah,
How do you see cigarette cases different, or do you?
I mean,
So
I think the difference is cigarette case is more fun than machete, and picking a weapon is supposed to be a more interesting choice than picking like an accessory to me.
yeah, exactly. And I think that as far as Lucky Cigarette Case goes, it's like just card draw is very powerful.
Yeah.
And maybe for me anyways, I don't feel like it's hitting a thematic like point to where like whoever would be carrying around a cigarette case that is lucky, this is what it does. And like whereas Machete, it makes sense in some ways. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to me, it's mostly like I don't ever want to feel like my choices are either to voluntarily give up what I normally like to do, which is try to make a deck that runs as well as possible, or make a deck that runs as well as possible and just like blast through everything and teleport around the map with a Pennant of the Queen, picking up a million clues every turn, drawing 1,000 cards, and never fearing any encounter cards at all. You know, and I should say I don't think we're totally at that point. Like, there's definitely, I think that the current string of like really really good seeker decks is arguably like kind of verging on it, but they're at least kind of pruning it a little bit by tabooing cards like Pendant. So it's something that I hope they'll keep an eye on and that I like would love to see them kind of acknowledge. But it's not like the current state of the game is like, oh, I hate this, I'm not having fun anymore.
Yeah, I mean, even in our conversation with MJ, she was talking about like them having a watch list, right? That has a lot more cards than are already on the taboo list, but that they might not know what they exactly want to do with them, or they're trying to figure out if other cards could come off so that they could put some on because they also want to be cognizant of the amount of cards that are on there. So there are a lot of considerations that are being made, and I'm entirely happy to observe the taboo list as is.
Yeah.
So, um, one thing about the taboos that we briefly asked MJ about was putting investigators on it. And I'm going to be honest, when I asked MJ, I completely forgot that Rex was an investigator on the taboo lists. Because in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, that's just how Rex works. And I haven't played Rex in like 4 years. So,
yeah.
But like, what... Do we think there's other investigators that should go on the taboo list, either as to buff them or to nerf them?
Mandy, absolutely. Amanda probably somehow, and Daisy's fine. That's it.
Well, they keep buffing Daisy by giving her new, more overpowered books, right?
I mean, it's weird because honestly, I really think that right now those three are pretty much equally strong. Like, it's weird to me that you want to taboo one of them and maybe not the others.
Well, I think that Daisy's whole shtick is that like she has a theme of like books and of she has access to two pretty good card pools, right? Like see both Seeker and Mystic have very good cards that are accessible to her. For example, like a Seeker being able to take Ward 2 is like what? But also Mandy's whole thing is that she just gets to draw more cards when she would draw cards. It's and draw like the cards that she wants when she finds more cards. And with Mandy, it's not even just that she has a 30 card deck size, has the most ridiculous stats of any, like dream stats basically for
Daisy's
Seeker.
stats are just as good.
And
Amanda arguably has like something better than good stats, which is her ridiculous ability.
Yeah, but that's why Amanda should also be nerfed. and Mandy can draw from 3 classes. Like you get the choice to do any one of 3, and the possibilities for her continuing to be like basically on top all the time just gets bigger as all like she gets 3 dimensions of being better in that she can, if Mystic shenanigans start being up on the uprise, she'll be a part of it. If more rogue stuff start to be up on the uprise, she's going to be a part of it. And it feels to me like she's got her hands in everything, and there's not really a discernible downside.
I don't know. I mean, I would be fine with it if they wanted the Taboo Mandy because I would just probably play Daisy more. But I have to say though, compared to what Mandy was like a year ago, so first, Mr. Rook now costs 8 XP. Secondly, the pendant is now basically not a card you're going to play. Same with 3 aces. And thirdly, Mandy's weakness is incredibly annoying, and it really is like a bump in the road to what you're trying to do with her. So between those three things, like, yeah, she is very strong, but I don't think that she's, like I said, I think Daisy is basically just as good and arguably even better. You know, and also relative to like, yes, she is really good, but relative to like a kind of replacement level seeker like Ursula or something, like, yeah, she's better, but even like Ursula is like incredible, right? So it's, I don't know. Bottom line, I would be fine if they wanted to taboo Mandy as long as they could do it in a reasonably fair and interesting way. I would be more interested to see them try to taboo some bad investigators like Rita or Lola that we have on the slide here.
I agree.
Anything that would like make them more fun. Like if they just wanted to taboo that Rita gets to play like a bigger card pool or something, that would be pretty great. I would be totally down for that. Or if they wanted to like make a parallel Rita that has a good signature card, maybe. Anything that, I mean, Lola, I'm not really. Lola's a whole separate universe, but if they wanted to make like some of these lesser played investigators, even just like give them bonus XP or something, I'm totally down for any of that.
I mean, for
Somebody
Rita,
made interesting iterations of Lola, and they seem pretty cool, fun to play.
yeah. I mean, for
It can be
Rita,
done.
I feel like their plan probably is the same thing that they did with Mateo, which is just put a trick on every card in in Edge of the Earth
And
or
Calvin.
something. Yeah.
They're gonna have to print a lot of tricks to make
Yeah.
to make Rita good.
And she only gets 0 to 3, right?
Yes.
She doesn't even get like, I don't know what a level 5 trick would look like, but
I mean, that's the same for Mateo, I think. Isn't he also 0 to 3 blessed or whatever? But
well, sure, yeah.
yeah.
But he's also a mystic and not a survivor.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I like Rita's theme, and she has 5 agility. It's just there's so hard for Survivor to make use of that agility right now, which I think is what the trick cards are supposed to do, but she didn't have access to too many of them.
She honestly she should have like tricks and like up to level 4 rogue cards or something, and she would still be like decent. You know,
I mean, if she level 4 up to level 4 rogue cards would just make her a better Wendy, wouldn't it?
No, Wendy's ability is really good, and Rita's ability is, yeah,
is pretty negligible.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, Wendy's got the 3 book and the 4 will. That's pretty good too.
Yeah.
I will say Rita, one of my very favorite investigators from Mansions of Madness second. So, you know, props to Rita for that.
Because it gave you an extra movement ability, so you could interact with things better or whatever.
One of the only investigators that I would allow me to tolerate playing that game. So
yeah, Rip Mansions of Madness. I'm pretty sure they confirmed they aren't making any more expansions for that. So
yeah, it was fun. It was cool.
I mean, the card game came out, and this card game is just is it somehow cheaper than Mansions of Madness? That can't be right, but it feels cheaper.
The miniatures cost a lot to make.
Right? Yeah, but there's not as many.
I will never. Weren't there scenarios in Mansions that were like, oh yeah, estimated time 8 hours or something like that?
there were some longer ones, yeah.
You just see that printed on the piece of paper, and you're like, am I high right now?
But there was definitely a couple of
numbers like.
Definitely a couple of very cool things in Mansions.
This is Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think our bottom line is, yeah, honestly, if they wanted to taboo investigators either up or down, I think we'd be excited for that, right? Probably the risk is the same with all this stuff is they don't want to taboo like every card in the game because then it's just hard to keep track of, so they have to kind of be careful. But
yeah, they've said they only want to do taboo like after each campaign, right, or like twice a year, because they don't want to have to monitor it constantly. Obviously, they got develop new stuff all the time, so I think that's why they're super cautious about it, right? Because they don't want to like introduce a change that they then have to like feel like they really need to revert quickly in like a month or whatever, or leave it in a bad state. So
yeah, but that's true.
You know, if they had more time somehow, then that would be good, because then they could be more experimental with a larger group of playtesters, aka the player base that actually cares about Taboo, which might be a small part of the small piece of the player base. I don't know, but so we talked about earlier that like some of the cards, especially some of the ones that got like are removed from game, feel like they were just tabooed to stop the weird, crazy niche combos. Do we think that there's a different way they could handle some of these cards to make it so they're still like kind of playable, um,
I have an
and
idea.
or it doesn't hurt their the majority of people that can take them. It's not just like premonition windy or whatever. Dane,
Yeah,
do you have an
yeah.
idea, Dane, you wish to discuss?
Yeah. Uh, this is one thing that I think just when Mandy came out, she broke pretty much everything that she could possible because of the way that her deck building works. And I'm going to blame Mandy for that just because why not? And uh, I think that a really good way to debut things, at least that I was thinking, might be to include cards, or rather include a new keyword similar to chained and mutated, color bound, or whatever you want to call it, where only investigators who are either have level 0 to 5 accessibility of this specific class, or whose investigator card literally is that color. And I don't know if that's a thing or not in the game, but whichever one of those would make more sense can include this card in their deck as part of deck building. Sleight of hand is like, for me anyways, the number one saddest card that has like just been brutalized by probably things that aren't rogues that can play things, because I have a hard time uh thinking that like somebody playing sleight of hand into Lupara would be like so breaking that they needed to like make it 0 to 3 and also only one-handed things.
No, it's too good.
Well, a big culprit of that I think was Necronomicon, which Mandy could do, and also what people were calling Slightning Gun, where Larry, aka Leo Anderson, uh, would sleight of hand a lightning gun out and shoot things with it. And that's a neat idea, but why? Like, why is it? Why? How is that game breaking? And so, like things like that, where it's other classes who are touching these cards that make everything worse for the rogue class. It just it feels bad because I want to sleight of hand my sawed off shotgun, and I can't because of Mandy and Leo Anderson. So thanks for that.
See, the Dane's idea is not it's not a bad idea, but I would handle it differently. I would just unban all of these cards because who cares? Like ban the Necronomicon. The Necronomicon's crazy. Just ban it. Sleight of hand, like I want to be as clear about this as possible. Leo Anderson sleight of handing out a lightning gun is not even close to being overpowered this game. Who gives a shit, honestly? Like, oh, he's gonna kill a couple dudes with it. That's not even drawing like 15 cards in a turn and getting like 12 clues and then teleporting across the map.
You know what that
Like,
literally is? That's Meltaroni, but
yeah,
it goes away at the
exactly.
end
Oh,
of your
like
turn.
he gets a Meltroni and he doesn't have to pay for it. Like that's not even close to do that all you want. It will not break the game. So like yeah, I unban sleight of hand, double or nothing, not even barely even a good card. Unban double or nothing. It's like yeah, just unban all
I
of these
think
cards. Keep
Well,
key of these banned probably, but I don't even really care about that.
I
I
feel like
think
Double or
so.
Nothing had several scenarios where it could be kind of absurd, but
Yes, I
Yeah,
think it
like
just led to unintended things happening.
yeah.
Uh,
I feel like
The
they
rules
could.
behind it were definitely weird, and you kept having to look it up.
I
yeah,
feel like you could reword it a bit so that maybe it doesn't apply to every single effect that you attach to it. So it's like, oh, I shotgun double or nothing. Oh, I did 15 damage instead of 5 or whatever it was. Or what did it do?
yeah.
The wording on it makes it so vicious blow actually gets doubled twice, like the effect on vicious blow, and also the whole vicious blow gets applied twice.
What?
So it's like
I mean, those
it was
those were
like
the
plus
types
6
of
or
questions that you
something.
had to
Yeah,
like look up every time because there was no real intuitive way
yeah.
to resolve it.
And that's yeah, and I think that's more ultimately the reason why it was forbidden, right? Because if they were to like have an action on a scenario card, like on a location, and it's like,
Maybe
oh, now I can do this
I
twice.
I fear that they might have like seen somebody do 10 damage with a shotgun once and been like, oh, we got to ban this. And it's like again, doing 10 damage with a shotgun, not that's fine,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's not very
It's not that
impressive.
big a deal.
You
Yeah.
gotta do like 16 or
Yeah,
17 at least for it to
you
be
have to have
impressive.
a skill value of like 20. You also have to have double or nothing in shotgun in your deck, which
Yeah,
yikes,
but I
right?
mean,
I
like
mean,
the instating something like colorbound isn't even just to prevent other players out of classes from doing ludicrous things with cards for classes that can't necessarily do as ludicrous things. It's also like some of the current ways that they taboo things kind of just feel bad for me. For example, like just chaining things because they're too strong the way the current iteration that they are feels not lazy, but just it feels like you're time gating things. And for people who haven't played MMOs, that just means that like they make you wait a certain amount of hours or days in order to do some sort of thing. So like if you want to craft the super legendary axe of awesome, you can only do that once every 24 days just because.
Should we
Because
should we go to the next topic, which is about exactly this?
yeah, let's do it.
Is the next
Uh,
topic. I didn't check the order of the slides. Is it that? Oh, it is. There we go. Yeah,
It sure
mutated
is.
mutated versus chained. So yeah, as Dane was saying, kind of dislikes chains because it just kind of delays buying cards, which maybe that's enough in some cases because it prevents you from having to. It gets you to the point where
but
maybe it's like an end game card versus like a mid game card or something.
but the
Scenario.
advantage
Not
to that
necessarily
is
true.
you still get to play with the good version of the card, right? Look at something like drawing thin, where imagine if instead of making it cost 3 XP, they just made it like cost like 3 resources or something. You would just never play it probably, right? Like they only have so many knobs they can turn for these things, and adjusting the XP at the very least means that you still get to play with the same fun, exciting card, right?
Yeah, but that's ultimately my argument for like a new category like colorbound, because it allows you to attack it from a different dimension, where
That
even something like all in where
that
it
wouldn't even apply to like Pathfinder or Drawing Thin though, right? I mean, like those cards are powerful not because they're being used in some other class, but just because
yeah,
they're really, really good cards.
yeah, but I mean, there are some ways, like we were talking about removing from game earlier. They wanted to use very sparingly. It just provides an alternative for things like that, where if you have, you catastrophes in your deck because they're fun to play, and because maybe you can get a little exploit out of it with Yorick. Uh, Now suddenly they just remove themselves. Never going to touch that card ever again. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
and doing something different than that, than either A, chaining it, or B, having it remove itself from game, is kind of feels very binary. And having another flexibility for tabooing things feels like a good dimension to have for me. It makes things feel maybe a little bit more dynamic, in the way that mutated allows.
I,
maybe.
I like the colorbound idea a bit. I guess in my mind, I don't know if I really want that to be a crutch that they have when they're designing cards, because I think when they design cards, they want to take all the investigators that can take the card into consideration in order to balance it. So if they're just going to be like, oh, if there's some weird combo that comes up later, I guess we'll just make it color bound. I don't know. It feels like a weird crutch, and I think they specifically try to avoid doing that as much as possible. So it probably makes it even like a more interesting design challenge to not have to say, oh, this is actually restricted just to this class. But I can see where you're coming from, where like if it's a card combo that's causing the problem versus just the card itself, it could be a way to relatively
One
cleanly cut off that combo. So
one way that other games have tried to solve that problem of sort of card interactions being problematic is to have like a restricted list where there's like a list of cards and you're only allowed to choose one of them to be in your deck at a time. Or which I think both Magic and Netrunner did that at some point. So that
Yeah,
way, if there's 2 cards like Sleight of Hand and Necronomicon, you could just put them both on the restricted list, and then no deck can include both of them, but a deck, a green deck could include Sleight of Hand, or a secret
yeah,
deck could include Necronomicon.
exactly.
That has its own disadvantages too. Like it becomes the more cards, eventually it becomes untenable. But
Right.
I think that can be a good solution. Um,
Yeah,
as for the mutated versus chain thing, just one last thing to say. One thing that they do bring up a lot is that they prefer to chain things because um, it only matters when you're kind of deck building and upgrading, and then you don't have to remember that there's different rules for the card. So it
yeah,
kind of
that's
makes sense,
definitely a pro.
especially for newer players that haven't memorized what every card does.
Absolutely,
Like
absolutely, yeah,
I kind of assume that maybe they have a kind of like informal rules for themselves, or they're like, we're only going to allow ourselves to have this many mutated cards at a time
yeah.
and this many eroded cards at a time, which honestly is a pretty good rule to try to follow, I think.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think for me, the pro of mutating things makes it feel like it's breathing new life into a card that was either otherwise kind of unplayable, like example like Springfield or whatever, or cranks something's power level down, but still makes it reasonable to play. And
Yeah,
yeah,
sometimes. I mean, my favorite example of this is honestly, if they mutated Pathfinder so it comes into play with 3 secrets on it and activating it costs a secret, it would still be a fantastic card, and it would honestly be more fun to play because you just have to find ways to put more secrets on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I,
or
I
at
mean,
least
I think that
decide when you're going to use it rather than use it every turn.
yeah, like I think that not every card has a kind of like really awesome way that it could be mutated like that, but definitely a lot of cards do.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I guess I'd prefer the taboo list. I don't know if there's cards that are a weak. I guess I don't want the taboo list to be used too often to actually buff those cards. I think I was MJ said that she tries to just add new cards to the card pool to buff those, and I feel like that's a better use. I feel like the taboo list should basically just focus mostly on nerfing the overpowered cards if possible. And
Yeah.
just if there's a weak card, it can either just stay weak and we don't use it and we're sad about it. But there's like a lot of cards in this game now. Many hundreds of cards. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
That was
quantifiable. So
that was actually one of the next things we were going to talk about, right?
was
Yeah.
it? Oh, it sure was. You guys rearranged these slides, and I didn't get
I just did because you brought it up. No, I don't
so
know.
so yeah, are there any non-taboo cards, individual cards out there that what is this question? Are there any non-taboo dominant individual cards out there, or does the current taboo list mostly hit all of them?
I would like listeners to know that Ben wrote this himself.
I don't think I did. I think someone else wrote this and I copy pasted it. There was like when you guys write questions, you write like a giant like 5 sentence prelude to the question and the actual question. I just take the actual question out to put on the slide.
Nice.
But yeah, what
I
this
don't
is
know what
like.
this card is though. What is this card on the slide? And why would you include it in a purple deck? Can somebody tell me that?
Oh, arcane research. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
what is
so
that?
we're talking about card. We kind of talked about this already, which was like cigarette case, but cards that just like always go in every deck, and it's like a no brainer. Is that
This
bad?
doesn't even go in your deck. This
Yeah,
goes next to your deck.
it goes
It
next to your
gives you
deck.
benefit.
Yeah, it gives
But
you a
see,
benefit. It has a trade
see
off.
that's why I think arcane research is kind of fine, is like not an example of this, because it doesn't take up slots in your deck or on your character. Like it's not competing with anything. Like cigarette case, I mean, we already kind of talked about this. I don't think that's really a problem either. But like cigarette case, you can at least argue that no sane person would ever play Crystallizer of Dreams as long as cigarette case exists,
or
right?
any other thing
I
that you
mean,
have access to. Like
basically,
literally,
unless,
you just played
well,
Lucky Cigarette Case.
unless you've
When you
got
play,
relic hunters or you're playing like Jenny or something, yeah, and you have all bad stats. But like arcane research is like, I mean, you it's basically just a choice where you can play it or not, and there is some trade off. Like especially if you're playing, clairvoyance and other things that deal horror to you when you draw a certain token. Having two mental trauma is like a serious downside. We usually
this is
take
true.
it, but it's like it's a choice where you choose to either include this or not, and usually you do choose to include it. But at least it's not like there's other cards that you never pick because you're playing arcane research.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
The like in terms of dominant individual cards, like yeah, I think Machete back in the early days of the game before it was tabooed was an example of this. I think there's fewer examples now. I would say maybe something like magnifying glass because I think it crowds out pretty much all other secret hand slot
Mm.
items, but everyone else loves to play Hawkeye camera and stuff. So apparently I'm on an island on that one.
well, it depends upon player count, right? Hawkeye gives like an interesting downside in that like you basically don't want to play it over
Yeah,
like
it's bad. That's the downside.
over one or two things. Well, it's bad compared to magnifying glass. Everything is bad compared to magnifying glass. But
That's kind
also,
of what I'm saying. Yeah.
a lot of people put stick to the plan in this ballpark. And for me, like I sometimes take stick to the plan
The stick
if
to the
I
plan is
can.
okay. It's not
But
great.
people really love stick to the plan in Guardians, and I can see why. It pulls 3 cards out of your deck, right? And if you're rolling, one of those cards can be a research that can happen immediately or whatever.
But
Like
again, because it's a permanent, it's not really competing with anything, right? It's
right,
competing for XP. But I also
yeah,
like I think it's cool to have these kind of like XP sync permanent cards, kind of, because it's ways that you can upgrade your deck without it makes getting more XP in a campaign that offers a lot still valuable, even when you've upgraded like all of the cards that are in your proper deck.
yeah. Again, it's a card. It's an issue where it feels worse in deck building than it does in trial. Something like Studious, for example. I hate the fact that I have to spend 6 experience to get Studious. But when I'm drawing like 7 cards in an opening hand, chef's kiss, baby. I love that feeling. Like but I also don't have any new cards in my deck. Like other, it just it feels bad from a deck building standpoint, but from a playing standpoint,
There
fantastic.
are there are a few things that feel better to me than spending XP to put Studiosus in my deck. It feels great.
Yeah, yeah. Just cards like that, though, that are incredibly dominant, that you just put in every single deck that can take it, are probably the cards that are on the look for the most by MJ and Jeremy.
I mean,
Um,
they don't break the game. They're just kind of boring because in terms of deck
yeah,
building, like it's not a decision. It's like, oh yeah, just you gotta take that because it's so good.
it's like
And
Jackson Howard, right?
I think it's okay to have a few of these for every class because it helps make that class have kind of an identity. Like, this really kind of plays in. It feels like the way that you spend XP as a mystic is you're upgrading your spells a lot. That's a thing that even back I think in the very early days of the game, they talked about how they wanted every aspect of the game to kind of have at least some sort of connection with your class identity, like
Yeah,
the way that you deal with treacheries, the way that you spend XP, the way that you decide what cards to put in your deck. And I think this is a part of that for Mystic. So I'm okay with a few of these. I think if there were a ton of them, yeah, that would be bad. But currently, this seems basically okay to me.
yeah.
all right, whoa, all right. So we got Edge of the Earth coming up. What existing cards or decks do you guys think could use a boost from new cards that come out Edge of the Earth or beyond? Like like what archetypes do we think want more support?
Yeah, because as we were saying earlier, this is kind of what MJ said is the way that they would like to kind of boost existing cards and existing decks is to like print more cards for them more than just spring fielding them or adding them to the taboo list in like a positive way.
Yeah, like we were talking about a little earlier, somebody like Rita, right, could really benefit from using more tricks in different ways. Or like obviously people like Mateo who have that very clear distinction that they can have those cards. Honestly, like occult people who can occult like include occult things in their deck building, they've got about 5 cards right now, 2 of which are good, like Hallowed Mirror and the Bloody Tome thing. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that there are a couple others that I'm missing, but
Well,
things like that.
there's some weird traits that I think the designers have like a specific mindset like what this applies to. Like I think MJ said that occult applies to stuff that like will become like an arcane thing or magical thing. So that's why there's like so few of them because there's so few that actually follow that upgrade path.
Sure,
But
yeah,
It's
like
kind of
yeah,
like in
having
Open
more of
War
it so
Second
that it's
Edition, where like the magic items deck is it's very rare to actually get like a magical item. You usually get a mundane item.
yeah, but it does feel weird like when there's investigators that have some trait that just is like part of their deck building. It's like, oh, okay, this is like what they get in addition to the regular class, but then there's none of it. And
yeah.
you
You
know,
remember when Rita came out? I think there were like exactly 3 tricks that she could play.
yeah,
One
now
of
there's
them was Pocket
exactly
Sand.
five. Yeah, Rita could use some
Yeah,
support. So I am excited to see if there's like a couple interesting tricks that come out that make Rita more interesting to play. Um, like I think a lot of the blessed cards that came out from Mateo, I don't know if they made him actually like compete in terms of power level with like other mystics, but I think it lets him do a lot more interesting stuff. Like previously, he kind of had like, oh, he'll be the one that does ceiling stuff or whatever, but now he can do like weird stuff with blessed very easily because he has access to other classes' blessed cards. So I think that
yeah,
can make him
exactly.
make a more interesting deck than he had before. While Rita right now doesn't have too much that makes her stand apart from another survivor that has a better deck pool. So
I would I would definitely love to see some more cheap disposable assets that Dexter can play because I think that would really power him up quite a bit. Um, I keep wanting to give Winifred a try, but I feel like she's just a couple cards away from, especially because they've tabooed all in and stuff. If they
yeah,
could print
Yeah,
some more and 3 aces, like if they could print some more cards to make up for all the ones that have gotten tabooed that Winnie would normally play, I would be excited to give Winnie a try. So
yeah.
I think those are high on the list for me.
Winifred does okay. I'm playing her in Forgotten Age with the girlfriend and her son and his girlfriend. You can follow those escapades on Instagram if you want. But she's doing okay.
Are you
Um,
are you mostly like evading stuff or getting clues or
yeah,
what are you
I mean,
doing?
I'm usually in charge of evading, and then I have like lockpicks and a couple guns that I sometimes get out. But like I think the goal for her is that you're supposed to like try to commit 2 cards like to every test and like constantly get more cards back, and you have like
Right.
Lucky Cigarette Case to help support that, which I'm not sure my deck is quite at that level yet. So because there weren't very many interesting like skill cards for me to put in at level 0, and like her deck
Yeah.
herself only comes with like 3 different ones I think, and one of them is kind of terrible. The
Yeah,
one
I,
that
I think if they could print a couple like low level green skill cards that are good for Winnie, that would be really cool.
They have a few that are good, but yeah, definitely could use some more support.
Another
yeah
thing I would love to see, I'm not really that kind of fits into this category. I would love it if they would print some cards to make any of the other Guardians like closer to Mark level power or quality. Like if they could just print some cards for like Tommy or
Oh,
so I mean Zoe's pretty fun. I might give Zoe a try, but like whenever I'm playing a non-Mark Guardian, I just feel like I don't have enough cards and I don't have enough ways to draw cards. So I'd love to see some more Guardian card draw coming at some point.
yeah does what does Guardians have? They have like Stand
they have
Together,
Glory,
They have Mark.
Glory.
Stick Together,
Yeah, no,
Mark.
I like again
Roland has Seeker.
the girlfriend's playing Nathaniel a lot, and she draws a lot of
Oh yeah,
cards
he's got
with
bibs
the
and
Nathaniel
clubs.
deck.
That's his whole
Have you
thing
tried
now.
Nathaniel
Like
yet, Dan?
No, I mean I might give Nathaniel a try, but
Nathaniel's
that's
absolutely ridiculous.
but that's kind of like
Yeah,
off on an island, right? That's like its own kind of separate thing that's sort of separate from most other Guardians. Because you could also say
Exactly.
like Carolyn can draw a bunch of cards too, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
I
overpowered
mean,
too.
yeah. I mean, Nathaniel definitely can draws lots of cards because a lot of his events are like card draw, and he's the boxing gloves trigger constantly every time you kill something.
Yeah.
So I give
yeah.
him a try if you want to draw some cards and also punch some things. It's also very funny to be fighting most eldritch creatures by punching them. So
Yeah, and
Yeah,
hit bans and various other things. Yeah.
so
I
absolutely.
think what I'm generally excited about in out of new expansions is when they use a familiar approach. For example, something like how we had Drawn to the Flame and Read the Signs, right? They're very similar cards, but the cost for doing them is a little bit different, and they give you a little bit slightly different benefit. I like cards like that a lot because they improve your deck's consistency while not completely like power creeping something, right? Because you can't like they both have these two cards that I'm talking about anyways have two very distinct drawbacks and I like seeing those kinds of cards and those kinds of strategies pushed. Like Intel Report and that whole cycle of favors was really cool for me. I like seeing those kinds of things. Um, and I like seeing things that are based off of different prerequisites. For example, I would love to see cards that are printed uh, that have to do, or maybe even just story cards. I don't know, that have to do with investigator subtypes. I feel like that's something that has never been a thing until like the Dream Eaters intro, and that's it. Like nothing cares about the fact that Mark is a veteran and Dexter's a veteran and Ashcan Pete is a wayfarer or whatever. Um, why do they include them if that they're not going to do stuff with them? That's
Flavor, Dane. Flavor.
those are the kind of things that
I
I
feel like
like.
it's a future proofing thing. That's like they have loose ideas on what they want to do with those, and they haven't quite decided how they want to implement it. Yeah, I like the Dream Eaters thing when it comes up. I maybe in the future they'll have a card that'll be like, oh, this is a card that Wayfarers can take or whatever.
It's so that in the future they can print DJ Fenris, which lets you like have an investigator buddy as long as it's
Reboot.
but only if it's like a wayfarer, right? Only a wayfarer investigator or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Lastly, I would like a bicycle card. I would like a player card that represents a bicycle, and I don't even really care what it does. I just think that would be neat.
Why didn't I think about this? More footwear, please. Since we got track
Wait.
shoes, it's a limit one per. And
Mm,
man, like what?
here's the thing, Dane. If track shoes is like the only footwear, then it's kind of fine that it doesn't really have an official slot icon. But if they started printing a million of them and they all say like only one footwear, then at some point it starts to look silly. It's like, oh, they really should have made like footwear an actual armor slot. So I feel like they have to keep it limited, right?
Oh, but I want like trench boots to go with my trench coat, and eventually my trench knife.
Yeah.
I
Is
want to get a
there?
set bonus because of that
There's
reason.
no. Is there no Fedora card yet? There should be a Fedora card. I don't know what it
That
does.
agree with that. There should be like a lucky fedora like for rogues maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. All
I want a
right.
green dynamite.
A green dynamite? Is it like you
Yeah,
gamble to see, like you have to run in there holding it, and you draw some tokens to see if it explodes in your hand before you can throw it or whatever?
that sounds
That's
great.
inappropriate. So anything else you guys had to say about Taboo List, either the current one or future random speculation?
I mean, only to say that we're kind of in an interesting spot in the game right now where we we're probably a few weeks away from getting like major spoilers for most of the new player cards in Edge of the Earth, and then hopefully that will shake up the meta quite a bit and introduce a whole lot of new stuff. So this is just kind of like a snapshot of where things are at right now, but we hope and expect that things will kind of change up a lot pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean to
Yeah.
piggyback on that, some
Tell
of
me
the
what.
cards in Edge of the Earth are going to be multi-class cards, right? So we're going to see a lot of
Mm,
accessibility, maybe unintended accessibility, because they're going to a ton of different investigators, and deck building is going to be really weird and exciting, and I love that. I almost like deck building more than I like playing the actual game, except I don't. So, yeah,
yeah, I'm interested to see what like the giant card dump does. Like we saw a giant card dump previously when the starter decks came out. But some of this is gonna be like twice the size, right? Because starter decks had like, I guess starter decks were like
Is that
20% old
true?
cards.
I
Yeah,
thought it was like about the same size.
it might be about the same. I was thinking like starter decks are like have some repeats, but they're like 80% new cards, right? So
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
so it'll be interesting. So I'm excited. Who knows when it'll come out? Because I think every different website in every different country has a different set of dates. Maybe it'll be September. Who knows though? All right.
Well, friends, thanks for joining us here on Twitch today, and wherever you're viewing this stream from. Listeners for listening. Who else plays with taboo lists? Does anybody else have their own taboo kitchen table list that you use for your play group? Come hang out with us on the Discord. Let us know about it. I'd love personally to hear about them because I like speculating about these kinds of things.
Everyone messaged Dane and says that your kitchen table taboo list is only Crystallizer. You've tabooed Crystallizer and no other cards.
They don't know about
But
my wither fetish yet,
He'll hate it.
so
oh, I forgot about that. I blacked it out because I assumed it was a joke.
reach out to us on Facebook, Reddit, or Instagram, or email us at comments@mur.fm. If you really love our show and want to get more involved, join us on patreon.com/Miskatonic University Radio to get access to exclusive Discord channels and other fun stuff. Or just leave us a nice review on your favorite podcasting network. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be safe, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us, friends.